November 5th, 1757, a frozen hilltop in Saxony. 42,000 Allied soldiers below. Frederick watches alone. The French and Austrian commanders are already laughing. They think they've already won. Frederick is finished. By sundown, more than 5,000 of those 42,000 will lie dead. The rest will be running. Frederick will do it in 90 minutes, half their numbers. A plan that absolutely no one saw coming. This is Rossbach, the most lopsided military victory in European history. It will last 5 brutal hours. If you've never heard of Rossbach before, you're about to understand why Frederick the Great was untouchable. If this channel helps you see history differently, please subscribe. It costs nothing. Let's go back to 1757. Prussia in 1757 was entirely encircled. France to the west, Russia to the east, Austria to the south, Sweden from the north. The 7 Years' War had been designed specifically to destroy Prussia completely. Frederick's kingdom was small, his treasury nearly empty. By autumn 1757, things were desperate. Prussia had just lost a major battle. Frederick needed a decisive win immediately. To understand Rossbach, you need to understand what Frederick was facing on the morning of November 5th, 1757. Everything was collapsing. France to the west with 60,000 men, Russia to the east with 80,000, Austria to the south with 200,000. Prussia's total territory was smaller than modern Portugal. Its population barely 5 million people. Frederick had 150,000 soldiers. Anyone else would have begged for peace, would have offered territory to stop the bleeding. Frederick did something different. He attacked over and over. Short, savage campaigns to knock one enemy out before the others could coordinate. The strategy of interior lines. Frederick called it making war like a shark. You stop moving, you die. He never stopped, not once in 7 years. October 1757 had been a nightmare. In the east, a Russian army destroyed Frederick's force at Gross-Jägersdorf. His brother-in-law was routed. Then French forces seized Hanover, threatening the one German ally Frederick still had. Everywhere he looked, the walls were closing in. What Frederick needed most in autumn 1757 was time. What he had least of was exactly that. The enemy was moving fast. The Allied force converging on Frederick at Rossbach was commanded by 2 men who managed to be both arrogant and incompetent simultaneously. The French commander was Prince Charles de Rohan de Soubise, a favorite of Madame de Pompadour, a man who owed his command to bedroom politics. The Imperial German commander was Hildburghausen. He commanded troops from 37 different German states, speaking different dialects, obeying conflicting orders. Together, they commanded 42,000 soldiers, confident, loud, and fatally certain that Frederick the Great was finished. Frederick arrived at Rossbach on November 3rd with approximately 22,000 troops, tired, hungry, and outnumbered 2 to 1. But Frederick had something the Allied commanders didn't. He'd toured this exact terrain months earlier and memorized every ridge and hollow. He rode the full battlefield perimeter on November 4th, one day before the battle, with a handful of staff officers. Said nothing for 3 hours. Then he stopped at a low ridge called the Polsen Hill, looked south, looked west, and the plan began forming completely. A plan that would enter the textbooks of every military academy in Europe for the next 200 years, without interruption. The morning of November 5th began with fog. Not dramatic fog, flat, gray, ordinary November fog that erases distances and deadens sound completely. In the Allied camp, Soubise and Hildburghausen were holding a council of war. They had been holding councils of war for 2 days. Holding councils of war for 2 days is generally a bad sign for an army. Very generally, almost universally in fact. Their plan was to march the Allied army in a wide sweeping arc around Frederick's left flank, cutting off his entire line of retreat. Trap Frederick between their force and the Saale River. Force a surrender. End the Prussian threat to Austria permanently and finally. On paper, it was reasonable, possibly even good. 2 to 1 odds with a flanking maneuver should force a Prussian retreat or surrender. There was one problem. Frederick could see them from the Janus Hill quite clearly. The moment those columns started moving, he knew exactly what they'd forgotten. They had forgotten that a flanking march takes time. An army marching in column is not a threat. It is a target. Its units strung out, separated, unable to support each other, unable to fire, unable to charge. It can only walk toward you. Frederick lowered his telescope and said they were delivering themselves into his hands. Then he sat down to lunch. The enemy was marching. He ate lunch. The battle was coming. Frederick the Great, King of Prussia, master of European warfare, watched the French approach and poured the wine. While Frederick lunched behind the Janus Hill and the Polsen Hill, hidden from Allied observation, the Prussian army was assembling in complete silence. 7 infantry battalions, marching in Frederick's oblique order. not straight at the enemy, but at an angle, designed to crush one flank before any reaction. And behind the ridge to the right, invisible from the Allied line of march, waited the man Frederick trusted above all others. Friedrich Wilhelm von Seydlitz, 30 years old, entered the cavalry at 17, rose through sheer terrifying competence to become Frederick's most lethal instrument. Frederick trusted Seydlitz the way a master swordsman trusts his best blade. Absolutely, completely, without reservation or second-guessing of any kind. Behind Seydlitz on that slope were 38 squadrons of Prussian cavalry, hussars, dragoons, cuirassiers, approximately 3,800 horsemen, hidden, silent, waiting. Meanwhile, the Allied flanking army was still marching. The columns stretched nearly 3 miles from head to tail. Nobody could see the full picture. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The Allied vanguard cavalry emerged from behind a wood and found something that should not have been there. On a hill to their left, moving. The Prussian artillery on the Janus Hill, 18 heavy guns, unlimbered and loaded, and aimed directly down the length of the Allied column, at a range of roughly 800 yards. The French officer who saw this has been dead for 260 years. You can still feel his stomach drop. The cannons opened fire at 3:05 in the afternoon. Witnesses said the sound was continuous, overlapping thunder that never paused for a single breath. The rounds tore straight down the length of the Allied column. Every ball that missed the first man found a second, or a third, or a fourth. The rounds tore straight down the length of the Allied column. Every ball that missed the first man found a second, or a third, or a fourth. The Allied cavalry completed the turn first. They massed to the south. An impressive force. Thousands of horsemen, colorful standards, determined to charge those Prussian guns. Then Seydlitz moved. 38 Prussian cavalry squadrons crested the Polsen Hill at a dead gallop all at once. 3,800 horses. The ground shook. Allied officers on the far side of the field felt it through their boots before they saw it. A vibration, rising. Then the horizon filled with horses. The French cavalry had exactly enough time to see what was coming, not enough time to do anything about it. Seydlitz hit them at full speed. 38 Prussian squadrons, in perfect formation, from slightly elevated ground, all coordinated to strike simultaneously. The French cavalry broke in under 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Some Allied units barely had time to draw their sabers. They turned and fled south, past their own infantry, carrying the panic with them like a disease. Seydlitz did not pursue. He pulled his squadrons back, reformed them on the slope in under 10 minutes, a feat of discipline that still astonishes historians. He was preparing for the second charge, because Seydlitz already knew, before Frederick ordered it, exactly when the right moment would come. He just watched and waited. While the cavalry battle consumed those 8 minutes, Frederick's infantry had been moving. 7 battalions in the oblique order, swinging around the Janus Hill's southern end, marching at a pace one Prussian general later described as the fastest their infantry had ever managed in their entire collective lives. And moving with that infantry, marching beside them in coordinated lockstep, were the Prussian field artillery batteries, steel and fire and men, as one moving fist. The Allied infantry had formed something resembling a battle line, still somewhat disordered from the routing cavalry smashing through them, but formed. They had muskets. They had numbers. They should have been able to hold. They had the right tools. They had the numbers. But they had already lost something numbers cannot replace: formation and confidence. The Prussian infantry opened their musket volleys at 200 yards. Not one volley, not two. The Prussians fired 5 rounds per minute, nearly double any European army. The Allied line began to dissolve almost immediately, not breaking yet, dissolving, thinning, losing cohesion, shot by shot, minute by minute, without pause. Soubise ordered counterattacks. Hildburghausen tried to wheel fresh units into the line. Everything too slow, too late, too disorganized. The 37 German contingents began firing on each other in the smoke. At approximately 3:30, the Allied line began to fracture, not in one place, in several places, simultaneously. The French regiments on the left collapsed first. Seydlitz watched the French left give way, watched the collapse spread like a crack in ice, left to right, regiment to regiment. He waited for the center to waver. The second cavalry charge hit the crumbling Allied center from the north. There was no rally, no last stand, no heroic moment of resistance, just collapse. The army of 42,000 soldiers became a mob of 42,000 terrified individuals in the time it takes to read this sentence. Frederick watched it from the Janus Hill. His staff officers cheered. He said nothing. The same calm expression he had worn at lunch 2 hours earlier. Then he gave the order for a disciplined pursuit, not a slaughter. He wanted prisoners. He wanted the political message more than he wanted the body count. The Battle of Rossbach lasted from 3:05 to approximately 4:30, 90 minutes, start to finish. The pursuit continued until darkness swallowed the field entirely. The Allied force suffered over 5,000 killed and wounded. 3,000 prisoners taken, 67 artillery pieces captured, 15 regimental standards lost in the field. The Prussians lost 548 men, 548, against an army twice their size. The numbers do not look real, and yet they are. Prince de Soubise fled the battlefield so quickly, he left his personal baggage behind. His private correspondence was captured and published in Berlin. His reputation never recovered. Frederick wrote about the battle to his sister with characteristic understatement. He noted the French had been thoroughly beaten and that he was rather pleased with Seydlitz's work. Rather pleased. Approximately 3,000 people died that afternoon, 500 of them his own. He was rather pleased. That is Frederick in a single sentence. The consequences of Rossbach rippled across Europe in waves. In France, the news caused a genuine national crisis. Voltaire went very quiet for several months. The French army's reputation, already not exactly sterling, was shattered at Rossbach. It would take decades and a revolution to rebuild it from that rubble. In Prussia, the effect was the opposite. The troops who had feared the French army discovered they had destroyed it in 90 minutes. There is no better morale injection. Frederick didn't celebrate. 27 days after Rossbach, he fought another battle at Leuthen against 80,000 Austrians with 33,000 Prussians, and won again. In December 1757, Frederick the Great fought and won two of the most astonishing military victories in European history within one single month. Napoleon studied Rossbach obsessively. Before his own campaigns began, he read every account of Frederick's battles he could find and borrowed directly from all of it. The oblique attack, assaulting a marching column. Cavalry held back for the decisive moment. The Prussian military tradition that emerged from Frederick's campaigns produced something even more lasting, the concept of mission tactics. Commanders at every level understanding the objective well enough to act independently, without waiting, without asking, without hesitation. Seydlitz at Rossbach didn't wait for Frederick to order the second cavalry charge. He judged the moment himself, acted, and it worked. That independence became a defining principle of the Prussian military tradition. Then, the German military tradition. For 150 years, it won wars in 1866, won wars again in 1870, and in the 20th century, in the wrong hands, also helped start them. Frederick the Great won the 7 Years' War, just barely. Barely enough to keep Silesia, keep his throne, keep Prussia intact and breathing. He called it the miracle of the House of Brandenburg, the string of genius and fortune that allowed a small kingdom to outlast 5 great powers. But here's what Rossbach actually teaches you about military genius, about any kind of genius, really. Frederick didn't win because he was braver. His soldiers were scared too. Every man in every army at Rossbach was terrified. Fear was not Frederick's advantage. The terrain, the timing, the killing ground were all chosen standing on a frozen hilltop, saying nothing for 3 hours the day before. He won because he understood that an army in motion is an army at its most vulnerable. He saw the trap before the enemy entered it. He won because he could see the whole board, completely, instantly, while his enemies were still arguing around a map table about what to do next. He won because he had Seydlitz, because he had the judgment to use him, and the discipline to hold him back until exactly the right moment. There is a story, possibly apocryphal, certainly characteristic, that after Rossbach, a young officer asked Frederick what the secret was. The calculation. Frederick looked at him for a long moment, said there was no calculation. War had too many variables for mathematics. What you needed was an eye. The ability to look at a field and see, in an instant, everything that was possible and everything that was not. That was it. That was all. Not the uniform, not the crown, not 30 years of campaigns, just the ability to stand on a frozen hilltop and see 42,000 soldiers losing. The village of Rossbach still exists. Saxony-Anhalt, Germany, today. A small museum, a monument, almost nobody visits. The ridge where Seydlitz assembled his cavalry is still there. Just a gentle roll in the landscape. You would drive past it without ever knowing. 3,500 people died on that ground in 90 minutes. For most of the year now, a farmer grows crops there. Time is interesting. Frederick fought 9 more major battles after Rossbach, won most of them. He outlived the 7 Years' War by 23 years, dying in 1786 at 74, in the same chair he'd fallen asleep in the night before, dogs at his feet, officers afraid to disturb him. The king who survived 5 great powers, 3 assassination attempts, and 23 major battles had died exactly as he always said he intended to. History does not remember Rossbach the way it remembers Waterloo. No romantic tragedy, no exiled emperor, no last charge. It sits quietly in specialist volumes. But for anyone who wants to understand how an outnumbered army defeats a larger one, how one mind bends the mathematics of war, Rossbach is the text. It always was. From Napoleon reading it in Paris, to Moltke studying it in Berlin, to every military academy that ever asked how you win against the odds. On November 5th, 1757, a man stood on a frozen hilltop. 42,000 soldiers marched toward their destruction below. They didn't know it yet. He had already eaten lunch. He already knew exactly how it ended. He was just waiting for the clock to catch up with his mind. The clock caught up. It always does.